Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. I have combined all the videos in our drawing app tutorial series into the single long video so that it's easy for you to follow. Now in this video we are basically going to create this drawing app over here using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So here we can see we can draw on this canvas. We can also change the colors and also the brush size. And we can click on this button to delete everything. And we can also click on this undo and redo buttons over here. We also have the dark and light modes. And we also have the recent colors displayed over here. So if I click on this color, we can see that that color is selected. And we also have the option of full screen. So if I click on this full screen button, we can see that the complete drawing is displayed in full screen. So we're going to design this from scratch using HTML, CSS and JavaScript in this video. So let's get started. Right, here I have created a folder called drawing app and I just opened it with VS Code. Now let's create the necessary file. So let's create a new file called index.html. Let's create another file called style.css and let's create one more file called main.js. And let's start with the index.html file. So in VS Code you can just type exclamation and press tab and you'll have this basic HTML5 code. So here in the head section let's link our CSS file. And in the body, let's link the JavaScript file. So let's type main.js. Right now, the first thing we will do is we will get the CDN of Font Awesome because we're going to use some icons from Font Awesome. So let's get the CDN. You can just search for Font Awesome CDN and you'll find this link. So let's open this link and let's go ahead and copy this link tag from here. And let's paste it inside the head section. Right, now let's start with the markup of our design. So the first thing we will do is we will create this top bar. So here we can see we have this heading and this toolbar. So let's create a division with the class of top bar, and in that we will have an h1, and let's tap drawing app pro. And let's open this in our browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension called live server. So once you have this live server installed on your VS Code, you can just right click over here in the HTML file and click on open with live server. And here we can see that our design is displayed in the browser. Now let's go back, and the next thing we will do is we will create the toolbar. So let's create a division with the class of toolbar, and in that we need to have two sections, one for this color and brush size and the other for these three different buttons. So let's create a division with the class of tool. And let's duplicate this. We have two different divisions with the class of tool, and we will wrap both of these inside a tool group division. So let's create a division with the class of tool group, and let's make this as a container division. Now in the first tool division, let's go ahead and create a label, and in the for I'll just tap color picker, and here let's tap color. So if you go back, here we can see that we have the color label displayed over here. And then we need to add this color picker. So let's go ahead and create an input with a type of color, and let's give it an ID of color picker. And by default the value will be #2d3436. So now if we go back to our website, here we can see that we have this color picker. And the next thing we need to do is create this slider for the brush size. So inside the other tool division, let's go ahead and create a label, and in the for let's type brush size, and here let's type brush size, and let's create an input and let's give it a type of range, and let's set the ID to brush size, and the minimum value will be 1 and the maximum value will be 100. And by default the value will be 7. So if you go back, here we can see we have the brush size, and by default the value is 7, and we can increase and decrease it. And the next thing we need to have is this section right here. So let's go ahead and create another division with the class of tool group. So let's tap tool group over here. Now in this we'll first of all create a button for clearing the screen. So let's create a button, and in the button we will have an icon. So for the icon we will use Font Awesome icons. Now we have already added the link of font awesome over here, so we can use the I tag, and let's give it a class of FAS trash alt. So this is the class that is needed for the trash icon, which is this one right here. Now there are some problems in the icon that it is being displayed multiple times, but we will fix that later. Let's add another button, and in this button let's add a class of FAS and FA expand. So here we have another button, and then lastly we need to have one more icon, which is this theme toggle button. So let's create another button, and let's add the icon called FAS and FA moon. So here we have the other icon. Now in the buttons we will add some classes and IDs. So here for the button 1, let's add a class of BTN and BTN icon and BTN danger. So this is going to be the red color button, and we'll also add an ID called clear canvas. So we will use this in the JavaScript. Let's also give it a title of clear canvas. So if you go back, if I hover over this, we can see that clear canvas is being displayed. So this is the title, and then we have another button, and here let's go ahead and give it a class of BTN icon. And for the last button also, let's give it a class of BTN and BTN icon. And let's also give it an ID of full screen button, and let's also add a title called toggle full screen. And for the third button, let's go ahead and give it an ID of theme toggle. Let's also give it a title of toggle theme. And this is how it looks. We can hover over these, and we get the title of the buttons. Now let's fix this problem that we have this icon is being displayed multiple times. So it is the problem with just the delete icon. So let's see what's the problem. So here we can see that this I tag is not having an ending tag. So let's add an ending tag over here. So now we can see that the icons are displayed correctly. We don't have any problems. Now the last thing we need to do is add the canvas. So for the canvas, we can directly add a canvas that we have in HTML. So let's go outside the top bar division and let's create a canvas. Let's give it an ID of drawing canvas, and we will style it later in the CSS. So with that, we have created the HTML of our app, and this is how it looks. Right, here's my source code, and here we have already linked our style.css file. So let's go to the CSS file, and let's start by adding some styles to everything. So let's tap asterisk to select every element, and let's tap box sizing border box so that we have the correct height and width for all the elements. And let's also target the body, and let's add the font family. So we're going to use a font called Poppins. So let's go ahead and get the link of Poppins font. Alright, so here I'm in fonts.google.com, and let's search for Poppins, and let's click on get font, and let's go ahead and click on get embed code. And here let's go to import, and let's copy this code from here. If you go to our website, we can see that we have this bold version and this regular version. So let's select just two of these styles. I'll just click on change styles, and let's select regular 400 and semi-bold 600. Let's also select one more, which is bold 700, and let's copy this line of code from here, and let's paste it in our CSS. Right, now let's go ahead and add the font family over here. So let's tap font family, and let's set it to Poppins and sans serif. Now let's set the display to flex direction to column, and align items to the center. And let's also set the height. So let's tap minimum height, and let's set it to 100 viewport height. So this is how it looks. Let's also remove the default margin. Let's set it to 0, and let's add a padding of 20 pixels. Let's add a background color, and for the background color we will create a variable. So here let's type root, and here we'll add the variables. So let's create a variable called bg color, And we're going to create two different versions of this for the light and the dark modes. So let's type BG color light. Let's set it to F4, F7, F8. And let's add a comment. Let's tap dark mode. And here let's tap BG color dark. And for this one, let's add 1E2127. And let's create universal variable. So this is what we're going to use in our actual CSS. So here let's go ahead and type BG color. And we're going to type var BG color. And here we will use the light variable. And for the dark mode, we will have a class called dark mode added to the body. So let's type body.dark mode. And here we will type BG color. And let's set it to var BG color dark. So when we have the dark mode, then the dark color will be added to our CSS. So let's go ahead and let's type var BG color. And now if you go back here, we can see this is our background color. But if you go ahead and in our body, if you add a class called dark mode, and now if you go back, we can see that we have this dark color. So this is how this light theme and dark theme works. The next thing we will do is add the text color. So let's type color and let's create a variable called text color. So let's go ahead and type text color light and let's set the value to 2C3E50. And for the dark mode, let's type text color dark and let's type D1 D5 DB. And here for the universal variables, let's type text color. Let's type var text color light. And for the dark mode, let's type text color. Let's set it to var text color dark. And when we change the colors, we need to change the colors smoothly. So let's add a transition and let's type background color and let's set the speed to a variable. So I'll just type transition speed and let's also add it to the color. So let's type var transition speed. So let's create this transition speed variable. So here in the universal variables, let's type transition speed. Let's set it to 0.3 seconds. Or now if you go back, this is how it looks. Let's go ahead and start with the top bar. So let's tap top bar. So if you go back to our HTML, here we can see that we have this division with the class of top bar and that we have this heading and this toolbar. So the first thing we will do is we'll type display of flex so that the items are one next to the other. Let's type align items to the center and let's add a gap of 40 pixels. And this is how it looks. Now let's style the H1. So let's tap H1 and let's set the font weight to 600. Let's set the margin top to 0 and let's add a margin bottom of 20 pixels. And this is how it looks. Right now let's style this toolbar. So let's go ahead and let's reference it. Here we can see we have this division with the class of toolbar. Let's tap toolbar and let's also add a comment. I'll just tap toolbar. So here let's go ahead and set the display to flex so that the items are one next to the other. And here let's add a gap of 15 pixels and let's type justify content center and also align items to the center so that they are centered vertically and horizontally. Let's go ahead and set the padding to 0 and let's go ahead and add a margin bottom and let's set it to 20 pixels. Now let's style this division with the class of tool group. So in that we have the first one which is for the color and the brush size and the second one for these three buttons over here. So let's go ahead and style the tool group. I'll just type tool group. Let's set the display to flex, align items to the center, gap of 15 pixels. Let's set the background color. And for this we will use a variable. Let's create a variable called surface color. And let's add a padding of 10 pixels and 20 pixels. Let's set the border radius to 16 pixels. And let's set the box shadow to a variable. Let's call it shadow. And let's set the border to 1 pixel, solid. And for the color, let's tap border color. So this is also a variable that we're going to create. And let's add a transition of background color. Let's type var transition speed for the speed. And let's tap border color. And we will add transition speed. So let's create these three variables: surface color, shadow, and border color. So here in the root, let's go ahead and first of all, let's add a comment over here, light mode. And here let's type surface color light. and let's set the hex code to FFF. And then we have shadow, so let's create the variable for shadow. Let's type shadow and let's set the value to 0, 4 pixels, 15 pixels, RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.08. And let's add this to the universal variables over here. And the next thing is the border color. So let's type border color light, and let's set the value to E1, E5, EA. Right now let's create the dark variants of surface color and border color. So let's type surface color dark, and let's set the value to 282C34, and let's type border color dark, and let's set the value to 3A414C, and here let's go ahead and type border color, and let's set it to var border color light, and here in the dark mode let's type border color. Let's set it to var border color dark, and then let's type surface color. Let's set it to var surface color light, and here let's type surface color var surface color dark. Or let's scroll down and let's continue with the styling. So here we have styled the tool group. Let's go back, and this is how it looks. We can see that we have the shadow and all the other styles applied. Right now let's go ahead and style these tools inside the tool group. So here we can see these elements should be one below the other. So let's target the division with the class of tool. So let's type tool. Let's set the display to flex direction to column so that they are one below the other. Let's add a gap of 8 pixels and align items to the center. So this is how it looks. Now let's style the tool label. So here we can see we have this label tag. So let's type tool label. Let's set the font size to 14 pixels. Let's set the font weight to 600. Right now let's style this input of color. So for that, let's go ahead and type input type of color, and let's go ahead and type WebKit appearance. Let's set it to none, and also appearance of none. And let's go ahead and type width of 45 pixels, height of 45 pixels, and let's set the border to none. Let's also set the padding to 0, and let's set the cursor to pointer, and background color to transparent. Let's go ahead and type border of 3 pixels solid var border color, and let's go ahead and type border radius of 50% for round shape, and let's also add a transition of border color var transition speed. And let's go ahead and add some more styles for the input of color. So let's type input type color colon WebKit color swatch wrapper. Let's set the padding to 0. So now we can see that the padding between the color and the border has gone. And let's also go ahead and add a hover effect. So if you hover over this, we can see that we have this effect. So for that, let's go ahead and type input type of color colon hover. Let's go ahead and type transform scale of 1.1, and here let's also add the transition. Let's type transform 0.2 seconds. So this is how it looks. Right now let's go ahead and style this input of slider. So if you go back over here to the HTML file, we can see we have this input, and here we can see we have this brush size, and we also have this input with a type of range. We also have this ID over here. Now let's also add one more division for displaying this value. So let's add it inside a div, and for this div let's also give it a class of brush slider, and here let's add a span. Here we will add a value, and let's set the ID to brush size value. Right now let's go ahead and style this brush slider. So let's type brush slider. Let's set the display to flex and align items to the center. Let's add a gap of 15 pixels. Now let's style this brush size value. So let's type brush size value, and I think it is an ID. So let's go ahead and add a hash over here, and let's set the font weight to 600. Let's set the font size to 16 pixels. Let's set the width to 45 pixels, and let's set the height to 45 pixels as well. And let's add a background color of var bg color. Let's set the border radius to 12 pixels, And let's bring this number to the center. So for that we will just type display of grid and place items to the center. Let's also add a border. So let's type border of 1 pixel solid var border color. And let's also add a transition. So let's type transition. Let's set it to background color var transition speed and border color var transition speed. Right, now let's style this input with the type of range. So here we can see we have this input. So let's go ahead and type input type of range. Let's type WebKit appearance none, appearance of none, so that we don't have the default styling. And let's type background. Let's set it to transparent. Let's set the cursor to pointer and width of 150 pixels. And let's go ahead and add some more styles. So let's type input with the type of range WebKit slider runnable track. So for this one, let's go ahead and add a background of var border color, and let's set the height to 6 pixels. Let's set the border radius to 3 pixels, and this is how it looks. Let's type transition of background color var transition speed, and let's also style this thumb. So for that, let's type input with the type of range WebKit slider thumb, and let's type WebKit appearance none, appearance of none. And now let's style it in a custom way. So let's type width of 20 pixels, height of 20 pixels. Let's set the margin top of -7 pixels so that it is in the correct position. And let's also set the background color to var, and let's create a variable called primary color. And let's also set the border radius to 50% so that we have round shape. Let's add a border of 3 pixels solid var surface color. So here we can see we have the border being displayed. Let's also add a box shadow. Let's set it to 0, 0, 10 pixels var primary color for the color. And let's also add a transition for changing into the dark and the light modes. So let's type background color var transition speed. Now let's create this variable called primary color. So here let's go ahead and type primary color, and let's set the value to 6A, 5A, F9. Now this primary color will be the same for the dark and the light mode in our website. So we'll just add one variable called primary color. So now we can see we have this correct styling for the slider. Right, now let's go ahead and style this part over here, and for that we have another toolbar group. So we have tool group over here, and that we have the buttons. Now for the buttons we have this class of btn. So let's target that, and we have this btn icon. So let's go ahead and type btn.btn icon. Let's set the width to 45 pixels, height to 45 pixels, border radius of 50% for round shape, and let's set the font size to 18 pixels. Let's set the border to 1 pixel solid var border color, and let's set the background color to var surface color, and let's set the color of the text, which is the icon, to text color. And let's bring these icons exactly to the center. So let's type display of grid, place items to the center. Let's also add a transition for the hover effect. So let's type transition of all 0.2 seconds. And when you hover over this, we need to change the colors. So let's go ahead and type button icon hover, and let's type transform, translate y -2 pixels, and box shadow of 0, 4 pixels, 8 pixels, RGBA 211 0.1. So this is how it looks. We also need to change the background color. Now for these two buttons we need to have the same color. So for that, let's target those two buttons. So we have this button with an ID of full screen button and another button with an ID of theme toggle button. So let's type full screen button and theme toggle. Let's type background color of var primary color. Let's set the color of the text to white, and let's add a box shadow of 0, 0, 15 pixels var primary color. Now we need to have this color only when we hover over this, so we need to add :hover over here, :hover. And we are not getting the color for this button right here, so let's go back. Let's see whether we have the correct names. So here we have full screen button and here the S is not capital, so let's make it capital. And now we can see that the hover effect is working. Now let's add the hover effect for this button, which is this button with the class of button danger. So let's type button icon and button danger. Here we will set the color to var danger color. Now we need to create this variable, and let's also add a hover effect. So let's type button icon button danger colon hover, and here let's type background color. Let's set it to var danger color, and let's set the color to white. Let's set the box shadow to 0015 pixels var, and let's create variables called danger glow and also primary glow for the box shadow color, so that we don't have the intense box shadow that we see over here. So now let's create these variables. We have primary glow, danger color, and danger glow. So here let's type primary glow. Let's set the value to RGBA 106 90 249 0.4. Now let's create a variable for danger color. Let's set it to E74C3C, and let's type danger glow. Let's set the value to RGBA 231 76 60 0.4, and here also for the input with the type of range. For the box shadow, let's set the color to primary glow. So this is how it looks. So with that, we have styled the toolbar of our website. Alright, so here I'm in my source code, and let's go ahead and add a new comment, and let's type canvas and full screen. First of all, let's target the canvas element. So here we can see we have this canvas tag with an ID of drawing canvas. So let's type hash drawing canvas, and let's set the background color to var surface color. So this is a variable that we had created earlier, and let's set the cursor to crosshair. So now we can see that this cursor turns into this crosshair. And let's also set the width and the height. So let's type width of 95 viewport width, which is 95% of the full screen that we have. And let's also type flex grow 1, and it will take up the maximum amount of space it can. And let's also add a border radius for rounded corners. So I'll just type border radius, and let's set it to 16 pixels. And let's also add a box shadow, and let's use the variable called shadow. And here we can see we have the box shadow. Let's also add a transition for the background color, and let's use the var called transition speed. And let's also create one more for box shadow, and let's type var transition speed. Alright, so this is how it looks. Now let's go ahead and add the styles for the full screen mode. So when we are on full screen, we will add a class called full screen to the body. So let's go ahead and add that over here, and let's type class full screen. So when we have this full screen class, our app will be in full screen mode. So let's type body dot full screen, and here let's set the padding to 0, and let's also set the overflow to hidden so that we don't have the option of scrolling. And when we are on a full screen mode, we don't want to display this heading. So let's go ahead and type body.fullscreen h1, and let's set the display to none. So now we don't have the h1 displayed. Now for the drawing canvas, we need to have the full width and height. So let's type body.fullscreen, and let's target the drawing canvas, and let's go ahead and type width of 100% and height of 100% and border radius, and we'll just remove it. And now we can see we have the full width and height. And now we need to remove this toolbar from here, and we need to place it on the right side. So for that, we have this division with the class of toolbar. So let's target this. I'll just type body.fullscreen toolbar. Let's set the position to fixed. Let's set the top position to 50% and right position to 15 pixels. And now we can see it is starting from the center. So we need to also type transform translate y of negative 50%. So now it will be exactly in the center vertically. Right now we need to display these one below the other. So let's go ahead and type flex direction column. Right now let's target the tool group of the full screen. So here we can see inside the toolbar, we have the tool group division. So let's go ahead and type body.fullscreen tool group, and let's type flex direction to column. Let's also remove the labels when we are on full screen. So here we can see we don't have any labels. So for that, let's go ahead and type body.fullscreen tool label, and let's set the display to none. Now let's go ahead and rotate this slider so that it is in vertical mode. So let's go ahead and type body.fullscreen input with the type of range, and here let's type transform rotate. Let's set it to -90 degrees. Now here we have this division with a class of brush slider, and in that we have the input and the brush size value. So let's also style this and make it vertical. So let's go ahead and type body.fullscreen. Let's type brush slider. Let's type display of flex and flex direction to column. And now let's add some margin below this color. So let's target the color. I'll just type body.fullscreen input with a type of color, and let's type margin bottom of 60 pixels. Right now let's also add some gap between the brush slider elements. So we have the input and the brush size value. So here for the brush slider, let's go ahead and type gap of, let's try 70 pixels. And for the input range, let's also add a margin of 5 pixels, top and bottom, 0 for left and right. So this is how it looks. Now let's also change the width of this slider. So here we can see for the slider, we had given it a width of 150 pixels. Let's reduce that a little bit. So here let's have width of 120 pixels. Right now let's go ahead and change the width of this tool group. So here we can see we have the tool group, and it is the group that has these two tools for the color and the brush size, and also another tool group for these three buttons. So let's change the width of this, and let's go ahead and type width. Let's set it to, let's try 70 pixels. Let's see how it looks. And I think we can increase it a little bit. Let's try 80 pixels, and that looks all right. And with that, we have styled our full screen mode. So let's go back to the normal mode. Let's go ahead and remove this class. And now we can see we are in the normal mode. Now let's see how our app looks on dark mode. So for the dark mode, we have this class of dark mode added to the body. So let's type dark mode. And this is how it looks on dark mode. But here we have some problems in the color input field over here. Now in the light mode, we cannot see it. So let's remove this. In the light mode, we cannot see it, but in the dark mode, we can see this white space over here. So let's go back and let's see how we can fix that. Let's go to the color input field, and here let's add one more selector called input with a type of color, : WebKit color swatch, and let's set the display to none. And now we can see everything looks all right. Now let's take a look at the dark mode of the full screen mode. So let's type full screen over here as well. So here the full screen mode also looks all right. So with that, we have styled our drawing app. All right, here I'm in my source code, and first of all, let's remove these classes. We have the full screen and the dark mode classes over here. Let's remove these. This is how our website looks right now. Now in this video, we will implement two things. The first one is the dark and the light mode, and the next one is the full screen mode. So we will implement these two functionalities in this video. So if you scroll down, we have already linked our script file over here. So let's go to the main.js file, and let's start by referencing some of the elements from the HTML. First of all, we'll reference the theme toggle button. So if you scroll down here, we can see that we have this button with an ID of theme toggle. So let's reference this. I'll just type const theme toggle equals document.getElement by ID, and here let's type theme toggle. And after this, let's go ahead and add an event listener to this. So let's type theme toggle.add event listener, Let's listen for the click event and let's create an arrow function over here. And the first thing we need to do is we need to add and remove the dark mode whenever we click on this button. So if we have the dark mode, we need to remove it, and if we don't have the dark mode, we need to add it. So we need to add the dark mode class to the body right here. So let's go ahead and type document.body.classList.toggle. So this will add it if you don't have it, and if you have the class, then we'll just remove it. So let's type dark mode. And we also need to change the icon. So when we click on this dark mode button, we can see that the icon changes to this sun icon right here. So let's go back and let's also type const icon, and let's set it equal to theme toggle. And in that we have this I tag for the icon. So here we can see we have this I tag over here, and by default the class is set to FA moon. So we have this moon icon right here. So let's go back over here and let's type query selector I, and here we need to toggle both the classes. We need to add and remove the moon class, and also we need to add and remove a class called FA sun, which will give us the sun icon. So let's type icon.classList.toggle FA moon. So if you have the moon class, it will remove it, and if you don't have it, it will add it. So let's do the same for the FA sun class as well. And now let's go back to our website, and if I click on this toggle theme button, we can see that the theme changes, and we also have the icon changed over here. And if I click on it again, it changes again. Right now, once we have the dark mode enabled, and if I reload this page, we can see that it goes back to the light mode. So let's store this theme data inside the local storage of the browser. So let's go back, and here let's go ahead and type if document.body.classList.contains. So if we have the class called dark mode, then we'll just go ahead and set the item called theme to dark mode inside the local storage. So let's type local storage dot set item. Let's call it theme, and let's set the value as dark mode, and let's add an else over here. So if you don't have the dark mode class inside the body, then we'll just type local storage dot remove item, and we'll just remove the theme item. Right now, let's check whether the theme is saved to our local storage. So here we need to type if local storage dot get item theme. So if we have this theme inside the local storage set, and if it is set to dark mode, then we'll just go ahead and type document.body.classList.add, and we'll just add the dark mode class over here, and we'll also change the icon from the moon icon to the sun icon. Now this will run when we reload the page or when we go to the page for the first time. So let's type theme toggle dot query selector I for selecting the icon, and let's type class list dot replace, and we'll just replace the FA moon class with FA sun class. Right now, let's go back and let's reload this page. We don't have any problems. Let's go to the dark mode, and if we reload this page, we can see that the dark mode still persists because of the local storage. So everything is working all right. Now let's also add the functionality of the full screen mode over here. Now if you go to our original app, if you click on this full screen button, we can see that we are in the full screen mode, and we also have the icon changed to another icon. And if I click on it again, we can see that we go back to the normal mode. So further, let's go back and let's go to the index.html file, and here we have this button with an ID of full screen button. So let's reference this. So I'll just reference it over here. I'll just type const full screen button equals document dot get element by ID full screen button, and let's go ahead and add a comment. I'll just type full screen, and here let's type full screen button dot add event listener. Let's listen for the click event, and we'll create a function called toggle full screen, and we'll just execute the function when we click on the full screen button. So I'll just create the function over here. I'll just type const toggle full screen, and here let's go ahead and type if we are not already in the full screen mode. So let's type exclamation document dot full screen element. Then we'll just go ahead and request full screen mode. So let's type document dot body dot request full screen, and we can also catch any errors if you want. So let's type catch and let's type error, and I'll just go ahead and alert the error for now. So let's type error and let's type dollar symbol curly braces. Let's pass the exact error message, and here let's add an else, and let's go ahead and type document dot exit full screen. Alright, so let's go back and let's click on this full screen button, and now we can see that we are in the full screen mode of the browser. And let's click on this button once again, and we are back to the normal mode. But when we are on the full screen mode, this toolbar is not going to the right side. So further, let's go back to our CSS, and let's see how we have set it up. Now here we can see that we have this class called full screen for the body when we want the full screen mode. So I'll just go ahead and remove this class, and I'll just use colon full screen, so it will detect whether we are on the full screen mode. So let's go ahead and select everything. So let's type body dot full screen. So let's select all of these, and let's replace all of these with body colon full screen, and let's replace all of these. And now let's save this. Let's go back to our website. Let's click on this full screen button, and now we can see that the full screen is working perfectly. Now the last thing we need to do is change the icon when we are on full screen mode. So let's do that. Let's go back and let's reference the icon. So here for the icon, we have this I tag with this class. Let's also add an ID over here so that we can reference it in our JavaScript. Let's give it an ID of full screen icon, and let's go back over here and let's reference that over here. I'll just type const full screen icon equals document dot get element by ID. Let's type full screen icon, and let's scroll down, and here let's go ahead and type document dot add event listener, and let's listen for an event called full screen change. So let's type full screen change. Now this event will be fired when we go to the full screen or when we exit the full screen. So here let's go ahead and create an arrow function. I'll just go ahead and type full screen icon dot class list dot toggle, and we'll toggle the icon called FA expand, and there is another icon called FA compress, so let's use that as well. I'll just have full screen icon dot class list dot toggle FA compress. Right, now let's see whether it works. Let's go back and let's click on the full screen button, and the icon is not changing. So let's go back, let's see what's the problem. And we had added the ID to the wrong button, so let's cut it from here and let's add it to the full screen button. So let's add it right here, and now let's go back and click on this full screen button, and now we can see that we have the correct icon displayed over here. So everything is working all right. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to reference some of the elements from the HTML. So we need to reference the canvas. So here we can see we have the canvas, and we have an ID of drawing canvas for that. And then we need to reference the color picker. So if we scroll up, here we can see we have the color picker, and we have an ID of color picker for this. And then we need to reference the brush input. So this is the brush input, so it has an ID of brush size. And then we also need to update the brush size value. So we need to reference this span as well with an ID of brush size value. And then we'll also reference this clear canvas button over here, which has an ID of clear canvas. So let's go to our main.js file, and let's reference these elements. So here let's type const, and let's type canvas equals document.getElement by ID, and here let's type drawing canvas. And the next thing we need to reference is the color picker. So let's type const color picker equals document.getElement by ID, and for the color picker we have an ID of color picker. And once we reference the canvas, let's also create a const called ctx, which is the context, and let's set it equal to canvas.getContext, and let's type 2D over here. So this will help us draw 2D shapes into our canvas. Alright, the next thing we need to reference is the brush size input. So let's type brush size input and let's set it equal to document.getElementById and let's type brush size. And then we need to reference the brush size value. So let's type const brush size value equals document.getElementById. Let's type brush size value. And then we need to reference the clear canvas button. So let's type const. Let's call it clear button equals document.getElementById. Let's type clear canvas. This is the ID. Right now let's go ahead and create some variables over here. So let's type let. Let's call it is drawing. So this will keep track of whether we are drawing or not. And by default, let's set it to false. And then let's create a variable called last x, which is the x coordinate of the mouse pointer. And let's create one more for last y, which is the y coordinate. Now this will give us the mouse position on the screen. The x coordinate is horizontal and the y vertical. Right now let's create a function called set context properties. So let's type set context properties. And in this function we will set up our brush for drawing. So let's type ctx, which is the context that we created right here. And let's type ctx.stroke style, and here we need to get the value of the color picker. So let's type color picker dot value. So this will give us the value of the color. Now let's type ctx dot line width, and for the width of the line we need to get the value of the brush size input. So let's type brush size input dot value, and then we need to type ctx dot line cap. We need to set it to round, and ctx dot line join, we need to set it to round as well. So this will make sure that we have smooth and rounded lines when we draw. And let's go ahead and create another function called resize canvas. This will help us retain the correct mouse positions and the drawing when we resize the canvas. So let's type const, and first of all let's store the image data inside a const called image data. Let's set it equal to ctx dot get image data, and here we need to pass the x value, the y value, and the canvas width and height. So let's type 0 0 for the top left, and let's type canvas dot width and canvas dot height. And now we need to sync the internal canvas size with the CSS width and height. So the CSS width and height is the width and height of this HTML element. So let's go ahead and type canvas dot width equals canvas dot client width, and let's type canvas dot height equals canvas dot client height. And now let's go ahead and type ctx dot put image data, and here we need to pass the image data and the x and the y values. So the image data is basically this one right here. So let's type image data, let's type 0 0 for x and y. So this will restore the drawing after the resize. And in the end, let's also call this function called set context properties, so that it reapplies the stroke styles after resizing. So let's type set context properties. Alright, now let's call this function at the beginning. So let's type resize canvas. Alright, now let's create the function to actually draw on the canvas. So let's type const draw, and we'll get some value inside this function. So let's call it e. And first of all, we need to check whether we are drawing. So let's type if exclamation is drawing. So if you are not drawing, then we'll just return from this function. And if you are drawing, then let's go ahead and first of all set the context properties. So let's type set context properties, which will set the stroke style, the line width, and all these things over here. And then we need to type ctx, which is the context, dot begin path, and after that we need to type ctx dot move to. So we need to move to last x and last y, which we created right here. And after that we need to draw a line. So let's type ctx dot line to, and we need to move to the current position, which is e dot offset x. So e is the value that we get from here. So let's type e dot offset x and e dot offset y. And then to actually draw the line, we need to type ctx dot stroke. So this will draw the line from the starting of the mouse pointer to the new position. And we also need to update the last x and last y values after this. So let's type last x comma last y equals e dot offset x and e dot offset y. So this is our draw function. Now let's go ahead and add some event listeners to the canvas so that our app knows that we are drawing. So let's type canvas dot add event listener. Let's listen for the mouse down event, and here let's type E. So when we click and the mouse is down, we need to make sure that the is drawing variable is set to true. So for that, let's go ahead and type is drawing equals true, and we need to update the last x and last y position. So let's type last x last y equals e dot offset x e dot offset y. Alright, now when we move the mouse and if we are drawing, then we need to go ahead and call this draw function. So let's type canvas dot add event listener, and let's listen for the mouse move event, and here let's call the function called draw. And now let's type canvas dot add event listener, and let's listen for the mouse up event. So when we stop drawing, then we'll just go ahead and create an inline function over here, and let's type is drawing is set to false. And even when we leave the canvas, we need to set the is drawing to false. So let's type canvas dot add event listener. Let's listen for the mouse leave event, and let's create an arrow function, and let's go ahead and type is drawing equals false. Now this should help us draw on our screen. So let's go back to our website and let's see whether it is working. So let's draw something, and we can see that we are able to draw on the screen. Now here we can go ahead and change the color. So let's change this to this color right here, and the color is also changing over here, but the color is not updated right here. So for that, let's go back to our CSS. I think we have some problems in the styling. So let's go to the input of color. So here for the input of color, we are setting the display to none. So we need to set the border to none, not the display to none. So let's type border none. Now we can see that the correct color is being displayed over here, and we are able to change the color. And let's change the brush size, and the brush size is also changing. Now when we move this slider, we also need to update this brush size value. So let's do that. Let's go back, and here in our JavaScript, let's go ahead and create an event listener for the brush input. So let's type brush input dot add event listener. Let's listen for the input event, and here let's type E, and here in this arrow function, let's go ahead and type brush input value dot text content equals e dot target dot value. So this will give us the value of the input field and store it to the brush size value span. So let's go back to our website. Let's check it out, and we can see that the value is updated over here on the right side. Alright, now the last thing we will do in this video is make this clear canvas button work. So here, let's go ahead and type clear canvas or clear button dot add event listener. Let's listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function. Here let's go ahead and type ctx, and we can just type clear rect. So this will clear everything inside our canvas. So we need to pass the x and the y values, and also the width and the height. So let's type canvas width and canvas height. So with that, our clear button should work. So let's go back and let's draw something over here. Let's click on this clear button, and everything is working all right. So that's basically how you can add the functionality of drawing in our drawing app. So now we can see that we are able to draw on our canvas, and we can change the brush size and also the color of the brush. And we can also go ahead and click on this button to clear the canvas. But we don't have the option of undo and redo. So let's go back to our source code. And first of all, in the HTML, let's add the undo and redo buttons. So here after the full screen button, let's go ahead and create a button. And here let's add an icon. And let's give it a class of FA undo. And this should go ahead and create this undo button over here. Let's also add the classes and the ID. So let's type class, and let's set it to btn and btn icon for the correct styling. And let's also add an ID. So let's type undo btn. So here we can see we have the undo button. Let's duplicate this, and let's create one more button called redo button. And here in the icon, let's type redo. So now we can see we have the undo and redo buttons over here. All right, now let's start with the functionality. So let's go back to our source code, and let's go to the main.js file. And first of all, let's target the undo and redo buttons. So here I'll just type const undo button equals document.getElement by ID, and let's type undo button, and here let's type const redo btn equals document.getElement by ID redo btn. And let's also create some variables for storing the history. So here let's go ahead and type let history equals an array. So by default it'll be an empty array. And let's go ahead and type let history index equal to -1. So this will store at what point of our history we are at the moment when we undo or redo. And let's create one more const called max history. So here let's go ahead and type 50. You can also add any number you want over here. Now we are adding this max history just to limit the number of saved steps so that the memory doesn't go overboard. Right, now let's go ahead and start with the functionality. So let's create a comment called undo redo. And first of all, let's create a function and let's call it save history. And in this function, we will write the code to save the current snapshot of the drawing on the canvas to the history. So we can go ahead and type history, which we created, which is an empty array, dot push. So this will add some data to the history. And here let's go ahead and add ctx, which is the context where we get the image data. So let's type dot get image data. And here let's go ahead and pass 0, 0 for the x and the y, and for the height and the width, let's go ahead and type canvas dot width and canvas dot height. Now this will push the current state of the canvas to the history. Let's add one more line of code over here, which is let's type history equals history dot slice 0 history index plus 1. Now what this will do is it will remove any future states of our drawing if a new action is made after undo. For example, if we draw something and after that if we press the undo button, this line will be removed. And now if I press the redo button immediately, then the line will come back. But if I press the undo button and if I start drawing something else, then this line should disappear from our history and it should no longer be available. So that's why we are adding this history slice. So it will slice everything from the first state of the canvas to the current state, and all the future states will be removed. And this will happen only if we make some more changes after undoing. All right, let's go back and let's go ahead and create an if condition, and let's type history dot length, and let's see whether it is greater than max history. So if it is greater than the max history, which is 50 that we set, then we need to type history dot shift. So what this will do is it will remove the first entry from the array. So if the history is 51, then the 0th entry will be removed from the history. So in this way, we will always keep maximum of 50 instances of this snapshot in our history. And let's add an else, and if it is not the case, then let's go ahead and type history index plus plus. So it will increase the index. So by default it will be -1, and then we will increase it one by one whenever we save a new history. Let's add one more if condition over here, and let's type if history index is greater than or equal to history dot length. Then we'll just go ahead and set the history index back to history dot length -1. So this will always make sure that the history index has the correct value. And we'll also create a button to update the buttons. So we need to disable these buttons whenever we should not be able to click on the buttons. So let's create a function called update buttons, and I'll just call it over here. Right, now let's create the update buttons function. So I'll just type const update buttons, and here let's type undo button dot disabled if the history index is less than or equal to 0, and redo button disabled if history index is greater than or equal to history dot length -1. So this will make sure that we are not able to undo if we don't have any history. And the same with the redo button. If the history index is greater than the history length -1, then we don't have any steps to redo. So we'll just go ahead and disable the button. And let's go to the CSS and let's add some styles for the disabled buttons. So let's type button colon disabled, and I'll just set the opacity to 0.5 and cursor to not allowed. Now let's go ahead and call this function right here at the beginning. So I'll just tap save history. And now we can see that the undo and redo buttons are disabled right now. Now we need to call the save history function when we draw something and we leave the mouse button. So here we can see that we have drawn this shape, and after we leave the mouse button, we should be able to save the history. So let's go back and let's take a look at the mouse up event listener, and here I'll just go ahead and type is drawing is false, and then we'll just type save history. So this will call the save history function over here once we complete a part of our drawing, and we'll call the same save history function in the clear button as well. So here let's tap save history, and now let's go back, and if I draw something over here, we can see that we have this undo button over here, so which means that the history is saved. And let's go ahead and console.log the values over here. So let's type console.log history, and let's tap history. Let's also type console.log history index. Let's type history index, and now let's go back and let's open the console. And now we can see that in the console we can see that we have the history, which is the image data, and right now it is this blank canvas, and the history index is set to 0 because by default it was set to -1, and when we execute the save history function, we are incrementing the history index. So now let's draw something. So now we can see that the history index is 1, and here we can see there are 2 items inside this history array, and this is the first item, which is the image with the blank canvas, and then this one is this shape that we just drew. Let's draw something else, and this is another shape, and now we can see that the history index is set to 2. And here we can see we have 3 items. This is the first one, which is the blank canvas. This is the second one, which is this black brush drawing, and this is the third one, which is this colored drawing. So in this way the history is stored inside our memory. So let's go back and let's remove the console log from here. Right now let's create a function called apply history. So let's type const apply history, and in this function we will get a state from the history and add it to the canvas. So for that, let's go ahead and tap if history, and in the index, if we just type history index. So if we have this history index, and if we already have a history, then let's go ahead and type ctx put image data, and for the first argument, which is the image data, let's type history index. So this will get the image data from this current history and add it to the canvas. And for the x and the y axis, let's type 0 0. And now we need to create another function to step through the history. So let's type const step history, and we'll also get direction over here. Now the direction is basically +1 or -1. So if we have -1, then it will undo, and if we provide +1, then it will redo. So first of all, let's create a const called new index, and let's say it's equal to history index plus direction. So if it is -1, then it will decrement the history index, so it will be history index -1. And if it is a +1, then it will increment the history index by 1. Right now let's add an if condition, and let's check whether the new index is greater than or equal to 0, ampersand new index is less than history dot length. So if these are true, then we'll set the history index to the new index. So we'll basically go back and forward in the history array. Let's call this function called apply history. So this will add the drawing of that history to the canvas. And let's also call the update buttons function. Right now let's create 2 functions. So let's type const undo, and here we'll just go ahead and call the step history function, and let's pass -1 over here, and this should be undo. And let's create another function called redo, and here we'll just call the step history function, and I'll just pass 1 over here, so it will increment. Right now let's add the event listeners for undo and redo buttons. So let's type undo btn dot add event listener, and let's listen for the click event, and I'll just call undo function right here, and let's type redo button dot add event listener, and let's listen for the click event, and here let's type redo. Now this should work. So let's go back to our website, and let's draw something, and let's click on this undo button, and the drawing is gone. Now let's click on the redo button, and it comes back. So everything is working all right. Let's click on undo, and everything is working all right. The redo is also working. Let's change the colors and let's see whether it works. And everything is working all right. So with that, we have completed creating the undo and redo functionality of our website. Now just for better user experience, let's go ahead and add keyboard shortcuts as well. So let's go back and here let's tap document dot add event listener and let's listen for the key down event, and we'll just get some value. I'll just call it E, and here we'll just check whether the user has pressed the Ctrl Z key, and we'll also check for the command key on Mac. So let's type E.ctrl key, which is the control key, or E.meta key, which is the command key, ampersand E.key to lowercase, so that we don't have any confusions, and let's set it equal to Z. So if the user presses Ctrl Z or Command Z, and if they are not pressing the Shift key, so let's tap exclamation E.shift key, then we'll just go ahead and first of all prevent the default behavior, and let's type undo. So we'll just call this function. Now let's write the command for redo. So let's type if E.ctrl key or E.meta key, which is the command key, ampersand E.key to lowercase equals Y. So if they press Ctrl Y or Command Y, or if they press Ctrl Shift Z or Command Shift Z, so let's type E.shift key ampersand E.key to lowercase equals Z. And here let's go ahead and tap E.prevent default and redo. So if they press the Ctrl Y key or the Command Y key or the Ctrl Shift Z or Command Shift Z keys, then they should be able to redo. So let's go back and let's draw something, and I'll just press Command Z and I'm able to undo. And if I press Command Shift Z, I'm able to redo. And I'll also press Command Y and I'm able to redo. So the keyboard shortcuts are also working correctly. And with that, we have completed adding the undo and redo functionality for our website. And in this video, we will add the functionality of recent colors. So for example, we have selected this color over here, and if I draw something, we have the drawing in the same color. And if I change the color to something like this, and now if I draw something, we can see that we have the color being displayed over here. But we'll also add a new section over here where we will display the recent colors. So first of all, it will display this color right here, and after that it will display this color, and we can go ahead and select any of these colors and we can go to the recent colors that we just selected from here. So we will add that functionality in this video. Now before adding the recent colors functionality, let's fix some things that we have in this app. So right now, if you just draw something and if I resize the window and if I draw something, we can see that the brush has changed to a different position and the drawing is taking place in a different position. So we need to fix this. So if you go back to our source code, here we can see that we already have created this resize function. So here we can see we have this resize canvas function, but we are calling it at the beginning. And when we change the window size, we are not calling it. So let's add that code over here. So first of all, I'll just create a function called debounce. Now this function is basically used to delay the function a little bit. So I'll just explain it to you in a bit. But before that, let's go ahead and call this function. So I'll just create one more const called debounced resize, and in that we'll call this debounce function, and we'll call the resize canvas function, and we'll pass 50 over here. So 50 is basically the milliseconds, and we'll also type window dot add event listener, and we will listen for the resize event. So whenever the window is resized, we will call the debounced resize function. So now let me explain to you what this does. Now whenever we resize our window in our app, we can see that this is a continuous process, and this will run the resize function a lot of times and it will make our app slower. So what we are doing over here is that we are delaying the function a little bit. So even if we resize the window, it will wait 50 milliseconds or whatever you pass over here before making the function call. So in this way, it will be an optimized application. Now let's go ahead and create this function. So here, first of all, let's create a timeout, and here we need to return a function, and here we will add the arguments. I'll just type ..args, and here we need to first of all call the clear timeout function, and we need to pass the timeout, and here we have misspelled it, right? So here we have timeout, And then we need to type timeout equals set timeout. And in this we need to call the function. So let's type func, which is the function that we passed over here. And we have a built-in function called apply. And in this we need to pass the context and the arguments. So I just pass this for the context and args for the arguments which you are getting from here. Then we just type delay over here. So this will be the delay that we pass over here. And right now we are passing 50. And if you don't pass anything, we'll just default it to 100 milliseconds. So now this should work. So let's go back and let's draw something over here. And everything is working all right. Let's resize our window. And now if we draw something, we can see that we have the correct position of the brush. Right now, let's go ahead and start with our recent colors functionality. So the first thing we will do is we'll create a division inside our index.html file. So here let's create a div and let's give it an ID of recent colors. Let's also give it a class of recent colors, or let's have recent colors container. And we'll create the content inside this using JavaScript. So let's go to a JavaScript file and let's go ahead and reference the recent colors container over here. So let's type const recent colors container equals document dot get element by ID, and let's type recent colors over here. Right now let's create an array called recent colors. Let's set it to an empty array for now, and let's create a const called max recent colors. Let's set it to 5. So we will display the 5 recent colors that we used. Right now let's create the function over here. So here at the bottom, I'll just go ahead and create a comment. I'll just type recent colors, and let's create a function called add recent color, and here we'll get an argument. I'll just call it color, and in this function we'll first of all check whether we have a recent color. So let's type if recent colors dot includes color. Then what we need to do is we need to remove the color if you already have it inside our recent colors, and we need to add it to the beginning of the colors section. So for that, let's go ahead and type recent colors equals recent colors dot filter, and let's call it C for the color. And here let's type C is not equal to color. So what this will do is this will replace the array with an array where we don't have the color inside the array. So for example, if we select a red color over here and then we go ahead and draw something, and if I change it to something different, and if I draw something, and then if we go back to the red color once again, then the color should not be added over here after that. We should remove the previous red color from there and add it to the beginning. So that is why we are removing the color from the existing colors, and here we will add the colors. So I'll just type recent colors. Now recent colors is the array that we created. Let's type dot unshift. Now this unshift function adds the color to the beginning. So let's type color over here. And now we need to remove the last color if we reach maximum recent colors, which is 5. So let's go ahead and type if recent colors dot length is greater than max recent colors. Then we'll just go ahead and type recent colors dot pop. So pop will remove the last element from the array. So it will remove the oldest color from the array. And then in the end, we'll also create a function called display recent colors. So in this function, we will display the colors in our page. So let's create the function right here. So I'll just type const display recent colors. Now before that, let's go ahead and console.log the colors. So let's see whether the colors are being displayed. So let's type console.log colors, and let's type recent colors over here. Let's go back and let's open the console. Now first of all, we need to call the function. So I'll just type add recent color, and by default we will add this dark color over here. So let's get the hex code from here, and it is 2D3436. Let's add that over here. Let's add this inside double quotes. So by default we'll set the color to this dark color. Let's go back, and here we can see we have colors, and in that we have this one color. Now when we change the color and start drawing, then we need to add it to the colors. So let's go ahead and add this function call to the mouse down event listener. So here we have this canvas.add event listener mouse down, and here let's go ahead and type add recent color, and here we'll just add the color, which is color picker dot value. So it will get the value from the color picker and add it to this array. So let's see whether this works. Let's draw something, and here we can see we have the dark color. Let's change it to this color right here, and let's draw something. And now we can see we have two colors over here. So the color is correct. We have the correct hex code over here. Let's add one more color. and we have 3 colors. Let's see whether the last color is removed. And here we can see now we have 5 colors over here. Now when we select one more color, this last color over here should be removed from the array. And here we can see that the last color was removed, so the colors are being stored correctly. So now let's go ahead and create the function for displaying the colors over here in our UI. So let's go back and here in this function, first of all, let's remove everything inside our recent colors container. So here we can see we have recent colors container over here, and we are referencing that over here. So we have recent colors container. So here let's go ahead and type recent colors container dot inner HTML, and let's set it to blank for now. And for each of the recent colors, we need to display the colors. So let's type recent colors dot for each, and let's call each of the color. And then we need to create a div. So let's type const color div equals document dot create element. Let's create a div element, and let's add a class. So let's type color div dot class list dot add. Let's add a class called recent color item, and let's type color div dot style dot background color. Let's set it equal to the color that we get from here when we loop through the colors. And we also need to add an event listener to this color div, so that when we click on the colors, we need to change the color right here. So let's type color div dot add event listener. Let's listen for the click event, and here just go ahead and type color picker dot value equals color. So it will set this color to this value right here. And then in the end, we need to go ahead and append this color div to this recent colors container. So here let's go ahead and type recent colors container dot append child. Let's type color div over here. Right now let's go ahead and add some styles to this recent colors container and also this recent color item. So let's go to style.css file, and here let's add a comment. I'll just type recent colors, and let's type recent colors container, and let's set the position to fixed. Let's set the bottom position to 30 pixels. Let's set the right position to 40 pixels, and let's add a border radius of 12 pixels. Let's also type box shadow, and let's set the value to var shadow that we already created, and let's add a border of 1 pixel solid, and for the color let's type var border color, and let's also add a transition. Let's type background color var transition speed, and border color var transition speed. Let's set the background color to var surface color. Let's add a padding of 4 pixels. Right now let's create the recent color item styles. So let's go ahead and type recent color item, and let's set the width to 30 pixels. Let's set the height to 30 pixels. Let's set the border radius to 50% so that we have round shape, and let's set the cursor to pointer. Let's add a border of 2 pixel solid var border color, and let's set the transition to transform 0.2 seconds, border color 0.2 seconds, and we'll also add a hover effect. So if you go back here, we can see that we have the recent color being displayed over here, and when you hover with this, we'll just add a hover effect. So let's go ahead and type recent color item colon hover, and here let's type transform scale. We'll just increase the scale to 1.05. So this is how it looks. Now let's go ahead and select a different color, and we can see that the other color is displayed over here. We'll display all the colors one next to the other. So let's go ahead and type display of flex over here, and let's add a gap of 10 pixels, and let's go back, and we can see that the colors are displayed one next to the other. Let's select the black color, and we have the black color displayed over here. Let's select a red color. We have the red color displayed over here, and if we select the black color once again, we can see that the black color is removed from here and added to the recent spot. Let's see whether after adding more colors the oldest color is removed. So here we have green color, and now when we select the next color, this dark color should be removed from here. So let's select another color. I'll just select this color right here, and let's draw something, and now we can see that the dark color, which was the oldest color, is now removed. Now let's click on one of these colors and let's see whether the color is changed over here. So let's click on this red color, and now we can see that the color has changed. Let's click on this blue color. The color has changed. So everything is working perfectly. So with that, we have implemented recent colors to our drawing app. So that's basically it for this video. If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.